Loneliness is undoubtedly one of the most difficult topics to address and discuss. And how do I know this? Well, because this is the 4th time that I'm recording this video. It's just so weird. As I was going through my thoughts and getting everything together, something just didn't feel right. And then it dawned on me. In order to make sense of this topic, or even really begin to wrestle with it and provide meaning for it, we have to come face to face with something very uncomfortable. And that is, in regards to our relationship with one another, we are completely and utterly alone. Alone? Yeah, that's what I said. On this blue marble that we live in, that's inhabited by billions of people that we come in contact with every single day, you and I are alone. Now, upon hearing this, some of you might be thinking to yourselves, what do you mean alone? I am not alone. I've got family, I've got friends, co-workers. Heck, I've got my bus driver. I can say hi to him. I'm not alone. And I get that. It makes a lot of sense. But I want you to consider something. We enter into this world alone and we exit alone. Nobody enters with us and no one leaves with us. When you're born, you come into this world alone. On your birth certificate, it's got your parents' name, but the one that it's indicating is you. And then when you die, your tombstone has your name on it, no one else's. And yes, I know about family tombstones, but you know what I'm talking about. Your tombstone has your name because you are the one that died. Now, we've talked about the beginning and end of life, but what about that space in the middle, the part where we actually live? Well, I want to ask you this question. Have you ever loved someone so much that it physically hurt? Now, I understand not everybody has had the opportunity to have this experience, but for those of you that have, think about it. Why was it that it hurt so much, or currently hurts so much? For myself, I can only think about my relationship with my wife. I remember getting married to her and holding her and being like, I just wish I could be closer and know you even more. But there always felt to be some sort of wall there, like, I can't be you. I can't know you even more. There's a limit to it. And that experience brings an aching of heart to us because it makes us long for even more. But that's why it hurts so much, because we realize that we can never fully know or integrate ourselves with someone else. I can't jump into your skin and you can't jump into my skin. You can't be in my head and see through my eyes and know my thoughts and reasoning. I see this principle come into play all the time in my therapy, especially when someone sits down in front of me that's had a similar experience to something I've gone through. The person and I have the ability to share the experience in a way, but both of us, and I have to make this very clear with them, experience it differently because we're two separate people. And because of that, neither of us could ever fully understand what the other person experienced. And that is because it's impossible to know someone else fully. And it's impossible to know someone else completely and fully because we don't even know ourselves fully. All of this circles back around to the fact that you and I, in regards to our relationship to one another, are completely and utterly alone. Again, you might be thinking to yourself, but why are you telling me this then? You said you were going to tell me ways to manage my loneliness, and instead you're making me feel even more lonely and isolated. Well, first off, I'll say this. There's hope moving forward, so don't give up on me just yet. And the second reason I bring this up is because it begins to help us identify ways in which we've been maladaptively dealing with loneliness. So let's begin with that. The first thing that I dealt with when I began to think about this topic was fear. And with any type of fear, it elicits a fight or flight response, right? And my choice was to run away from it. And biologically, this makes a lot of sense. When we're presented with a danger that might inflict harm on us or make us feel uncomfortable, we're going to want to self-preserve so we get out of the way. But in regards to our emotional or identity development, running away or fighting frantically can be one of the most harmful things we can do. Let's start with the running away piece. There are a ton of people who refuse to look at this truth that I've laid out to you. They have the giant existential monster of loneliness hanging out back here, and they just kind of cross their arms and smile and go, oh, everything's fine. It's going to be all right. I don't know, nothing there. They just flat out refuse to look at it or deal with it. And unfortunately, some people can go their entire life without ever wrestling with this piece. Personally, I always think of the little cartoon dog that's sitting in the bar that's completely on fire. He's got his little drink there and he says to himself, it's fine, everything's okay. So we've talked about the running portion, but what about the fighting portion? Well, this group takes the ideology that loneliness is something to be fixed or cured. This is where all the self-help gurus, TED talkers, and seminar providers come come out of the bushes and gutters with the intent to sell you the top 10 ways to make yourself never lonely again. As mentioned before, they see loneliness as a problem to be fixed, but treating loneliness in that way is essentially like placing a band-aid on a gaping wound. You've only superficially covered up the issue, but you've left the real problem unaddressed. Now, I don't want to be overly cavalier with these people because I do think that these tips and tricks can actually be helpful when used in the right way. But when they're used as a band-aid that'll be a quick fix, it's not a good way to approach it. But you know, it does make sense to me why these things would be so popular, especially in the United States. We've been spoon-fed the lie that suffering and pain and uncomfortableness is something to be completely and utterly avoided. No, instead, our ultimate goal should be to be happy and pursue that which makes us happy. Everybody's got to be so happy and perfect. If you want to hear me rant about that more, just click the little link that comes up right over here. I digress. We've been spoon-fed these lies for so long that it's created this false expectation of what loneliness is and how we're supposed to manage and deal with it. We get told that loneliness can be cured if we follow these steps and that it'll never return again. But that's not the truth. The truth is loneliness is not something that we get rid of, but something that we instead have to embrace and look at. And this is where we begin to look at ways to manage our loneliness. We have to start with the realization that you and I will always be lonely at one point or another. And we have to realize that loneliness isn't something to throw away or run away from. It's something to embrace. And why would we embrace it? Well, because in embracing it, it sets up realistic expectations for us. We have a healthy foundation to say that, you know what, I'm not going to be able to get rid of my loneliness, but it's instead something that I'm going to have to learn to live with because it's a reality of my existence. Now, before we go any further, I have to say this. I understand that the advice given is very simplistic. It's easy to say, but I also know that the majority of you watching this are probably thinking to yourself, well, that part I get. I've already thought about that. But how the heck do I embrace my loneliness? What does that even look like? It's not like I can grab something here and just be like, I've embraced my loneliness. But how do I embrace that which I can't physically grab? And I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that, yes, you can embrace it, but the bad news is that there is no one way in order to do this. But what I can do is share my own personal experience with it, and you can see if this relates to you at all. When I think back about when I started embracing this uncomfortable truth of loneliness, one of the things I think about is courage. The first thing is you have to be willing to look at it. And that's undoubtedly the most difficult part, because when we begin to think about being completely and utterly alone, it's scary. It goes into the unknown. It touches on the existential angst of humanity. But that uncomfortable fear is the very thing we have to look at directly in the eye and face. And rest assured, this type of activity is something that is meant to tear down who you've created yourself to be so that the real person who you are can come back up. But that can't be done unless we wrestle with this. But let me tell you this. What I've ended up finding is that it has shaped me immensely as a human being because it's given me compassion for other humans, especially when I sit in a room with someone else. I know I can never fully know you, and I know that you feel completely alone, but take courage, take heart, because you are not alone in your aloneness. But this is a first step, and again I'll say it, that in regards to our relationship with one another, our humanity, we are completely alone. But when we begin to embrace that, we begin to find deeper meaning in our lives, and we're able to relate to others because of it. Alright, well that was undoubtedly a lot to unpack, and I think I've given you more than enough to chew on for this week. But as we end, I want to hear from you guys. Have any of you had the ability to really confront your loneliness and what that actually means? If so, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you liked this video, found it beneficial or entertaining or whatever, would you consider liking, subscribing, and hitting that little notification button down at the bottom? We're going to continue this discussion moving forward, and doing that is going to be one of the best ways to be notified when the next video comes out. So if you don't want to miss it, go ahead and do those things. Let me know your thoughts, and until next week, keep confronting reality.